Oh, hi guys, I forgot to record this, so we're just doing this one solo, or I am doing this one solo. So this will be the first of two parts. We'll talk about classifying the categories, predicables, and divisions. But this slide and Mondays, we're just talking about classifying. Today we'll talk about ambiguous and unambiguous terms, clear and unclear terms, vague and exact terms, univocal, equivocal, and analogous terms. And then Monday we'll pick up on the other stuff. So anyway, if I go a little quicker, it's because there's no one here, so I don't anticipate having to repeat things. All right? So we'll start out, first of all, by talking about the distinction between ambiguous and unambiguous. And you should know up front that with this and some of the other ways that we're classifying terms, a term is never really ambiguous in itself or unambiguous. Well, I should say it's never ambiguous in itself. It's only the way that we take it out of the context. Okay? So first off, ambiguity. Really, we're talking here, there's a confusion between two legitimate meanings. All right? So it is the same word, but it really has differing legitimate meanings, and that in itself causes some error in our understanding of that. Okay? So for instance, if we say God is good, and I slept good, and the dog is being good, obviously we're talking about the same exact term that has legitimate meanings, but because it is ambiguous, it's difficult for us to really know exactly then what is good, because obviously sleeping good is not the same as God being good or the dog being good. So how do we clear that up? Well, you always clear something up by making it unambiguous, and by doing that, you need to give some more information. So when we talk about God is good, we really mean good there in the sense of a perfection, of the person God, as opposed to the concept of evil. If we were talking about sleeping good, we're talking more in the sense of I had a long night, sufficient sleep, I feel rested, I wake up in the morning, and therefore I have slept good. When we say the dog is being good, we're really talking about behavior, so we're referring to the fact that the dog is or is not obedient. So again, legitimate meanings, but just simply a confusion between them because it's the same word that has differing legitimate meanings. Okay? All right. Next, we'll talk about the distinction between clear and unclear. Now, just like ambiguous, clarity only resides in the person hearing it. So a term is never clear or unclear in itself. It's only clear or unclear in the sense that we know it. So really, clarity is nothing more than the meaning of the term is known. In other words, if I know what it is, it's clear to me. If I don't know what it is, then it's not clear to me. Now, you need not know what these terms are. I only use them as examples. So the word deflocculant in pottery, which I make, oftentimes we'll make a big slurry. It's called liquid slip. And if I add too much water to make it more fluid, then the harder or the bigger particles of the clay will settle out, and everything will become very watery and will saturate molds and such. So what I have to do is I have to find a way to make this more liquid, a thinner slurry, without simply adding water. So I would add, in my case, sodium silicate, which is a deflocculant. That's a noun. And what that does, it deflocculates the slip, the verb. It charges the electrolytes, and it looks almost like magic. What looks like almost pudding, with maybe 200 to 400 milliliters of sodium silicate in a 30-gallon container, will turn it into a nice, almost like a thin milkshake. All right. So deflocculant is a very, very clear term, but if it's unfamiliar to you, then it's not clear. Now it's misspelled, but it's the same thing with viscosity. Viscosity is if it's known to you, is an extremely clear term. It literally means the resistance to flow. So molasses would be very viscous. You pour some molasses on the table, it might slowly puddle out and spread out, but not as quickly as if we had poured like an inexpensive or a cheap syrup. That would flow quite easy. Viscosity is what is measured in oil, so 30 weight, 5W30, 5W20, and such. So anyway, not that those terms are important for this class at all, but just so that you know, if you know what they are, it's a clear term. If you do not know what it is an unclear term. So defining will help this. Now, as far as vague and exact, to say that a term is vague is different than whether or not the term is clear or ambiguous. A term that is vague is that, let me say it this way, the definition will sound a little odd, but I'll clear it up with an example. The meaning of the term can apply to borderline or a range of meanings. So the meaning of the term can apply to borderline cases. Now, we need vague terms in our world for communication, but they don't help us when it comes to use them as terms in logic. So here would be an example of a vague term, the term tall. She is very tall. Well, unless I am pointing at somebody, we don't really know what that is. If I were describing, say, to a police officer about someone who might rob the convenience store, what did he look like? Well, he was short. That's not going to really help. So to overcome this vague term and to make it more exact, we might add something as the actual height. So instead of me saying she is very tall, which would be a vague description, I will say she is 5'9". Okay? So that's how we overcome this. Another example is you are a child. Well, that's true for every single person who's ever lived, because no matter how old you are, you did have parents and you came from them, so you were a child. We could be talking about adolescents, we could be talking about toddlers. So the way to overcome this is then to qualify it somehow by saying, you are a toddler, you're an infant, you're in third grade, something like that. Okay. So again, tall and child, unless we have something specific, unless we are seeing something there to give us sort of a context, it remains a very vague term. Okay. Last slide. Told you this would be quick. This is the distinction between the way a word is used, univocally, equivocally, and analogically. Okay? Now, a univocal term, just think of the word within that, univocal, one voice. A univocal term, this term has only one meaning. Okay? It has no other meaning. This makes it very clear, unambiguous, and exact. So if we say, you have a logic class, I have a theology class. The term class in both of those instances are used univocally. This makes, again, very clear, unambiguous, and exact. If I were to talk okay, so equivocal or equivocal, if you say it that way, it might make you understand what the word means, like, the voice of equal. Means that the term has two or more different meanings. Okay, so it's the same looking word, the same word, but it has two or more different meanings. So if I were to say you have a logic class, there I'm talking about a population of students in a room. And if I say the way you dress has class, I'm talking about the style that by which you dress. So that word would be used equivocally. Now, most of the confusion that I've experienced as a teacher with students, like if they say, well, what about this case? Well, that sounds right, but this could be the case too, so maybe that would make what you're just saying wrong. Well, oftentimes, more than not, they are using a word equivocally, and I then explain, no, the way that you have used it, even though it sounds the same, you're being used as a different meaning. You'll notice that, especially like in this section, comedians who are oftentimes very intelligent, they play off of all this to get their jokes. So the jokes are, they might use a term equivocally and put them together, and then all of a sudden we get it, and then it seems humorous. Okay, I don't have one for you. Sorry, guys. All right, and the final one is analogical. So a definition for analogical would be that the terms are different but related. Okay, so unlike equivocal, where there's no relation between the population of students in the class or the way that you dress class, or if we had to add a sort of class, like a social class. With analogical, they are related, but yet they are still different. This one could be a little tricky, so we'll work out problems next week that go over this. So if I were to say that sharp-looking jacket was cut with a sharp pair of scissors, there I'm using sharp in the same way, but in an analogical sense. So I'm going to have to at least come up with an idea of how are these the same, and then obviously how they're different. If I were to say how they're different, that's the easy one. Okay, one, we're talking about the style of the jacket, and the other one, we're talking about a pair of scissors and its ability to shear things in two or more. But how are they similar? Well, they both have to do with a certain precision, all right? So a person who puts together this jacket or wears this jacket is trying their best to precisely look good. And a person who's using a very sharp pair of scissors is trying to precisely cut along a very specific path, okay? Now, if you think that's a stretch, there's other things that he uses in the books. I think the one out of the Craif's book talks about the good man gave us good dog, a good meal. So there's a similarity that both good man, good dog, and good meal are something that we all desire. Yet good in the man refers to his moral character, good in the dog really refers to the obedience, and good in terms of the meal is talking about it's nutritious, or that we, at least we obviously desired it. So we'll go over more of these in class, but that's all I got for now. This was a quick one. See you guys. Have a great weekend. Ciao.